It was a unique feeling, and that's when I realized going into entrepreneurship was probably the most rewarding in many ways, and especially financially, if you know what you're doing.
Welcome to the Wealth Through Real Estate Investing podcast, your source for real-world strategies focused on creating long-term wealth, cash flow, and financial freedom through real estate. Through guidance, tips, and stories of highly successful real estate investors and thought leaders, we provide you the tools to succeed and reach the lifestyle you always wanted. And now your host, Dwaine Clarke.
Hello and welcome to the Wealth Through Real Estate Investing podcast. This is your host, Dwaine Clarke, the number one source for top interviews with the best real estate investing experts and thought leaders. Today we have Adam Carswell. Adam is the Director of Media Investor Relations for Concordia Realty Corporation and ACM Capital. Adam is also the host of two podcasts, Dreamchasers and the Liberland Show. Adam, how are you? And thank you for joining us on the show.
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Dwaine. It's a huge honor. I've been following your show for a few months now and seeing your interaction, especially on LinkedIn. So to be here now is, like I said, definitely an honor.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. We had a nice chat pre-show to kind of about like where your background and where you're located. You said you're currently in Canada right now?
I am. I'm on the real East Coast, as I like to call it, St. John's, Newfoundland, the first city in North America that the sun rises on every day.
Oh, nice. So your background is very interesting. We have a lot of similarities as far as like entrepreneurship and business and real estate. But for the people who are not too familiar with your background, would you mind taking a few minutes about yourself, how your story is, and a little bit about your companies?
Absolutely. It all started in Paynesville, Ohio, which is a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. Lived there for the first 18 years of my life, moved to Western Pennsylvania, went to Westminster College for 4 years, got my degree in journalism, but wanted to be a college basketball coach. That was my main focus at the time. Moved to Belize, Central America, to continue my studies, where I also played basketball and ended up coaching basketball. Got my master's in business administration while I was there. And just to make a long story super short, we ended up winning a national championship when I was a player, and then my dream came true the next year. I actually became the head coach of Galen University, and then we won another national championship. So it was just like, wow, 23 years old, achieved my life goal in a sense.
Wow.
Wanted to move back to the U.S. Didn't want to go back to Cleveland because I was just in Belize for like 2 years. I don't want to go back to Cleveland. So I landed a job. I just wanted to land a job with the Fortune 500. And so I got in with Sherwin-Williams, the paint company. I knew someone who was a recruiter in the Washington, D.C. area. I managed stores for 2 years there with Sherwin-Williams, realized there was a bit of a ceiling there in regards to ultimate, like final growth in the company. And in the most humble way possible, I tell people I want to be a billionaire one day. And selling paint probably ain't going to get you there unless you got some kind of tricks up your sleeve. So real estate seemed like a good avenue to start traveling down. Became a residential realtor with RE/MAX for 2 years. And then after that, during my time at RE/MAX, I started going down the commercial rabbit hole, which really ultimately led me to where I'm at now, which is working with Concordia Realty and ACM Capital. Thankfully, all the work that I do is on the phone or over the internet. It's remote. And so that allows me the ability to travel and live, in a sense, wherever I please. I like to stay within the U.S. time zone. So now here in 2019, and whenever you're listening to this podcast, I'm in Canada right now, St. John's, Newfoundland, and enjoying my time here.
Yeah, it's the beauty of technology, right? You can be able to kind of do what you can anywhere you want. So what kind of kicked off kind of like your entrepreneur mindset? I know I speak to a lot of CEOs and real estate investors, and they always have some type of sports background. I don't know if it's that, but what about for you? What kind of kicked off what got you into different ventures and ultimately landing where you wanted to be, what you want to do?
I would like to say that sports was a big part of it, but I think that ties more just to sports are really good for building mental toughness and understanding how teams work. So I can't tie it directly to my involvement in sports, but I will say during my time at Sherwin-Williams, I started a side business. Again, long story short, basically selling T-shirts to clients of mine at the store. A lot of my clients were Spanish speaking, didn't know how to go to a print shop and set up an order, for example, but they wanted shirts for their crews. And so my friend and I were selling customized shirts to these Hispanic contractors. And we weren't making, for example, a ton of money, but we were successful with it. And for the first time ever, when I would close a sale, I was like, oh, wow, all of this is mine. I'm not getting like a commission percentage or whatever. Like I actually get to keep all of this. And it was a unique feeling. And that's when I realized going into entrepreneurship was probably the most rewarding in many ways, and especially financially, if you know what you're doing. So that's kind of when it started. That was the summer of 2016.
Wow. And then things kind of took off from there. Can you kind of touch on it? You just mentioned briefly about Concordia and ASIM. What are their kind of their key focuses on, and what kind of like your role at the company?
Yep. And so my role with both firms are pretty similar, but not identical. What I like to tell people is I handle media marketing, investor relations, and strategic positioning. I'm learning how to underwrite deals as well. But again, I've been working with both of these firms for just about a year. So I'd be wrong to say that I'm an expert, on the way there. But at Concordia, our main focus is retail real estate shopping centers. We invest in shopping centers, work with investors, preferably grocery anchored centers, either B or C class. And we look to implement value add strategies over 3 to 10 year periods. At ASIM, we're syndicators. And so we primarily syndicate deals in mobile home parks and self-storage. And now that we've had success in those asset classes, we want to diversify for our investors. And so most recently, we actually have a workforce housing fund based in, I want to say San Antonio, but one of those properties in the funds is actually in New Mexico as well now. We're looking to acquire 3 more within the next year. And I have to say that fund, along with the other ones that we have, our track record is all easily accessible through asimcapital.com. I'm very, very, very blessed to be working with 2 individuals in Michael Flight and Hunter Thompson, who are just not only dominating their industries, but really showing me how to do it as well.
Mm. As far as kind of like, because it seems like you're in both 2 different sectors, and of course, like they have their changes in the marketplace. So it's really good that you kind of touch in different parts of each market sector as far as like asset types.
Yeah, and you're right, and that's what I like about it is working with Hunter. I get to see more of how the syndication model works, and then working with Michael. We are looking into syndications and stuff, or excuse me, I shouldn't say and stuff. We have syndicated deals before, but it just looks different, right? As we just mentioned, and we're more so operators as well when it comes to Concordia, rather than touching different asset classes.
As for a person like you that want to kind of like another person that's listening to this podcast, like a upcoming entrepreneur, like what's kind of like your way of like approaching relationships to get with the ASIMs and the Concordias of the world to kind of build that to get to that place?
Absolutely. And I'm happy that we're taking the conversation this way, because this is where I kind of feel like I am more of an expert, especially speaking to the younger generation or anyone looking to get into real estate, right? So it sounds simple, but it really does all start with networking. It starts with who you know. I've been able to grow exponentially with my network over the past year just by posting on LinkedIn every day. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it really works. So I would recommend that to anyone listening. And then also, I have, as we mentioned, I have not only my own podcast, but I also run the other podcast for Liberland. And being able to shake someone's hand and tell them you have a podcast, whether you have 1 listener or 1,000, it almost doesn't matter. It just gives you a certain level of credibility that you wouldn't normally have. And I'd say kind of those few things just right there that I mentioned have really helped get me on the inside with the individuals that we're talking about networking with.
Yeah, that's some very good insight there. Because like I said, it's so many different avenues out there to kind of build up, but you focus on building your brand through LinkedIn network. And I found that podcast is not only just you adding a lot of value to the listeners, but it's like you're having like a 1 hour or half hour networking session with that person. It's like you're sitting down in a chair and just talking about them, picking their brain about all this stuff and kind of learning new things, and then eventually build to a relationship where you can take it to the next level.
Yep, and that's my slogan too. I don't know if you have seen it. Take it to the next level.
Yeah, I've been checking it out. So could you tell us about your 2 podcasts? You have the what's the first one?
And we've got Dreamchasers and the Liberland Show. Yeah.
How about you tell us about the Dreamchasers? That's very interesting.
Sure. Yeah. And then Dreamchasers really is what led to the Liberland Show. I started Dreamchasers originally 2 years ago now, November 2017. And not even realizing that I was going to turn it into a podcast. It was more of, at the time, I had a friend who was showing success early on in the direction that he was going with his business. He's actually an electronic music producer, which happens to be my favorite genre. And when I heard this first EP that he released, I was so shocked. I had no idea he had this much talent. And I'm like, dude, we got to find a way to highlight you. I'm not sure how, but I did have a vlog at the time. And so I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm going to interview him to kind of bring him to the light and then see what it does for me as well. And then I was like, okay, you know what? I could actually make this a thing. So I did 4 or 5 more like video interviews. And then I realized what I was doing was basically starting to run a podcast. And then I took, at the beginning of 2018, the Cash Flow Connections Mentorship Program, which is the mentorship program that I now help Hunter teach and facilitate with ASIM. And after I took that course and started building my relationship with Hunter was like, dude, the podcast wave is coming. It's still not too late. You need to step on the gas and turn this thing into what it should be. So I have to give a lot of credit to Hunter. That was probably like May 2018 where I cranked up Dreamchasers to the next level and really haven't looked back. And then, so I would also recommend going to check out episode 71 in particular, just because I just released it. And it's the second ever long format one that we've done. And I actually found, I don't know if people are going to listen to it or not, but people actually do listen to the long format ones that we've done. It's 2.5 hours. I did one, episode 59, and it had way more plays than all of the other episodes that I had kind of clustered around it. So I don't know how that works or whatever, but just something to throw out there for anyone who's a podcaster. And then, so having Dreamchasers, I met the leaders of Liberland in Washington, D.C. in the fall of 2018, really just not by coincidence, but it was one of those things where it's like, is this really happening right now? Interviewed the president for my vlog, and I was like, hey, I also have a podcast. I noticed with Liberland, it looks like you guys don't have a podcast. You mind if I do it? And they were like, yeah, we had someone start it, but they kind of let it fall off. So sure. Yeah, Adam, if you want to run it, go ahead. I'm like, okay, so here we go. Liberland Show, getting ready to record episode 41 now. 42's in the pipeline as well. And I'm just talking now. It's fun.
Wow. Do you kind of focus more of your podcast on this kind of you bringing up a topic and talk about it? Do you have guests that you interview on the show?
Yeah, for Dreamchasers, I like to interview individuals that are either within 5 years of starting their career or a new business project idea, something that's younger than 5 years old and has shown promising success within those first 5 years. So that way we can highlight it, similar to my friend who was the DJ, highlight that early success and then kind of use it as like a, hey, like this is the next big thing. This is who's coming. Get ready type. And then whoever that is too can always look back, 10 years from now, like, oh, I remember that.
Oh, that's a very cool idea. I really like that a lot. That's awesome. And as far as the Liberland Show, is that you're just kind of, interviewing government officials, people that live there or people that's interested? Like, what's kind of that show about?
Yeah. So on the Liberland Show, normally, not always, but I'd say 9 times out of 10, if not more, I am interviewing someone who is a representative of a certain country. For example, Minister of Foreign Affairs has been on the show twice. I've interviewed actually the representative of Ohio. I think I've had him on the show 3 times now, just because he's so good to have on there. Wow. But yeah, so different representatives and leaders around the world that are associated with Liberland come on, share their story about how they got started, and then especially if it is a repeat guest, which like I said, I've had a few, then we'll have a more conversational episode similar to what you and I are doing right now.
Wow. Yeah, I really like that, especially interviewing all these different guests, and especially for that country where it's just, you're just highlighting it more, just us doing this, and it's going to be broadcasted to thousands of investors, entrepreneurs. They're going to be like, what's this place? They're going to start learning more about it, and it's going to even, increase the visibility there. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what we love, especially right now. Our 5th anniversary of the country is April 13th. I plan on traveling to Liberland then. That will actually be my first time physically visiting the country. So if anyone listening wants to join me for the Liberland anniversary in April, I'm sure my contact information will be in this interview.
Yeah, I was telling you that we had some similarities because my wife is from Slovenia, which is, a couple countries down. And now I'm like, I'm curious, like maybe we can start taking a plane trip over there and check it out. So ever since I met her, I have like the traveling bug, and like, so we go over there either every year or every other year. So we're going back, and we try to venture out to a new place and just, check out all of just so many nice places there. Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about the country that you know of over there?
Yeah. And by country that I know of, are you?
Yeah, for Liberland. Yeah. Any
Okay.
details you can share with us?
Oh, sure. Well, to also tie into what you just said too, I actually am Slovenian as well. My mother is 100% Slovenian. She was born in the U.S., but if you go to Cleveland, Ohio, like we mentioned before our call, there's a lot of Slovenians there. And so it's cool that I happen to be doing all of this with Liberland, because it's almost like it's a piece of who I am, bringing me back to where I came from. Liberland, the territory is only roughly 4 square miles. So it's a very small piece of land. And kind of the future that we envision for the country is similar to something of a Monaco, Hong Kong, Singapore type of environment where, it's an economic powerhouse, and entrepreneurs and business leaders and owners can go there and thrive and set up their businesses, because probably the most captivating, if not one of the most captivating things about Liberland is taxation is voluntary.
Wow.
And so if you're a citizen and you care enough, I should say, about who's running the country, laws, regulation, etc., if you're paying your taxes, that's when it's going to matter. For example, when your vote is counted. If you don't really care who's running what, you are not obligated by any means to pay any taxes. And the voting system is also set up on a blockchain, so there's it's full transparency.
Mm-hmm.
I can see who you voted for. You can see who I voted for. There's no recount. There's no need for recounts. You can see it all right there. So very open, transparent, liberty focused. I kind of view it as almost like probably how the people are, as we say in the U.S., our founding fathers, the people who left Europe to pursue a more free life. It's kind of that same spirit being reincarnated now in the Yugoslavian territories.
Wow, that's very interesting. Wow, I had no idea, and it's so I got to learn more about it. And of course, we're gonna have some more conversation on that, and maybe just have another chat on that on another podcast.
Sure.
But kind of kicking off to kind of like your the personal side, like self-development. What is kind of like your routine? Do you have any specific routine? Are you an early riser, and what's kind of like your day-to-day thing that you do?
Yeah, before I moved to the far East Coast, I was living on the far West Coast in Silicon Valley. That was up until April of this past year. So at that time, I would consider myself more of an early riser. The cool thing now, as I mentioned to you before the call, I'm an hour and a half ahead of Eastern Standard Time. So I can kind of brag a little bit. And for me, I normally don't start my day before 9 a.m. now, because that's 7:30 still on the East Coast. So I'm capable of doing it, but no, not an early riser. Get my sleep. One thing that I do, and this actually did help declutter my mind, was for a long time I was, putting together my calendar, my schedule every day on my iPhone, which is very helpful. But I noticed sometimes I wouldn't stay on track timing-wise with the things that I planned. And if I got off track timing-wise, I would really beat myself up. Just kind of, it's just one of those things like, oh, I missed that, or oh, I didn't finish doing that. And then what I realized was trying to stick to the calendar as best as I can, especially, for example, our podcast and meetings like this, but everything else, populating it in the calendar so I know it's there. And then the day before that day begins, I sit down for 5 minutes. I go through what I'm going to do the next day. And then every day I write down my daily checklist. And so there's rarely a day now where I get to the end of the day and I don't have everything on here crossed off. Sometimes that happens, but it's not like something traditional that I've heard someone teach on a show before, but I just found that's what works great for me.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I stick to it.
Yeah. That's the thing, it's just so many different tools and systems that you can use, and all these gurus saying, try this and try that. Is really, I tried a whole bunch of different things, and it just really comes down to what works for you. Everyone has a different life, but if it's the end goal of completing a bunch of tasks, just find a way that works and stick to it. And, eventually just, going to get better at it. So what are kind of some advice that you can give for some upcoming entrepreneurs? I know you kind of feature a lot of those guys on your show. What are the kind of similarities that you're hearing or recommendations that you can give for people that wants to, get into your shoes one
day? I think it really still, I gotta put even more emphasis on the things that I mentioned earlier, which is if you do want to be an entrepreneur, and especially in real estate, and this is mainly speaking just from experience and what I've lived, I can't imagine what it would look like if I did not have a podcast and if I did not use LinkedIn, jokingly, as religiously as I do now. Those two platforms have just 10x'd my growth as a professional, introduced me to so many people. My voice is now, for example, going, like we just mentioned, across to I don't know how many investors right now, guys. Like if you're thinking about doing it, look what it's done for me. Like just go press record and do it. And it's so easy to do now too, in regards to podcasting. Go to anchor.fm, and I still can't believe how user-friendly it is to just create a podcast using that platform. And not only do you create a podcast on Anchor, you have the option to kind of check a box that allows them to send it out to 11 other major platforms, including Spotify, including iTunes. So now is the time. I think by 2021, the podcast industry is going to be valued at like just over $1 billion. So you can still catch the wave. And yeah, like I said, just keep it digital and keep shaking hands.
Awesome. Yeah, I love it. Is there any kind of book recommendation? I always ask entrepreneurs, anything that, that you read in the past or that you're currently reading that you could recommend for our guests, from the audience?
Yeah. And I should say, first and foremost, I'm a huge fan of Audible. It's helped me consume a lot more books than I probably would have been capable of doing otherwise. The best book that I physically read recently was 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. That book, I think my biggest takeaway from it was, try to envision, and he used many different examples, but this is the one that stood out to me, is how Apple basically from its inception went out to not be something that was a competitor. Rather, it was continuously and still to this day creating its own genre. Mm-hmm. So be someone who is constantly creating your own genre. That's kind of what 0 to 1 talks about. I'm rereading 10X by Grant Cardone, or re-listening to 10X by Grant Cardone right now. And every time you listen to that book, I feel like it just flips the switch back onto 10X in your mind. And then probably my favorite or most read and listened to book is The Secret by Rhonda Byrne, which is a book that I feel like has a lot of cliches in it. But if you're someone who can look beyond a cliche and actually embrace what it's saying, it can change your life.
I love it. Yeah, I'll make sure to put all these in the show notes. And I have a large library. It keeps getting bigger every time I talk to somebody. I'm like, oh, you got to check out this. You got to check out this book. And it's just the little nuggets that you get from it. Sometimes it's just you read 300 pages and you just get one thing. And that's the thing that you're looking for. You got to go look through the pages to find it that can change. Like you said, you mentioned Grant Cardone. Every time you read it, kind of just turn that switch back on. And it's probably just a few sentences that just say, okay, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to change this, I'm going to add this. So that's definitely key.
Yeah. I just posted a quote from 10X on LinkedIn the other day. It was, what was it? Forward thinkers don't compete, they create.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
Simply said. And it's so true and so impactful.
Yeah. Thank you.
And as far as kind of like I always ask my guests at the end of the show, what are you most grateful for?
I'm going to give, let's see, because I feel like this is a question where you probably get a lot of the same answers. Like you see, like, oh, my parents, or, so I do my best to create a new form of answer here for you. And I think for me, when it comes down to it, and you look at this world that we're living in, everything around us, physical, digital, everything that we know to be reality, we have that, and then we do have a spirit. And for me, I feel like I've always been a spiritual person. I was raised in a very spiritual household. I was raised in a Christian household, for example. But the more and more that I've just kind of done my own research and gone through my own life experiences, I've realized, like, okay, so if you can focus on your spirit and figure out and realize that it's basically like it's invincible. You're invincible. You're untouchable. No matter what ever were to come your way, digitally or physically, like I said, nothing can ever touch the spirit that we have. And so once you realize that, then you can start to open and free up certain parts of your mind that maybe you just never thought of freeing up before. And so I'm constantly on a mission to grow my spirit and learn new things and gain new experiences and go into new environments, regardless of culture, regardless of religion, regardless of whatever. I just, in the best way possible, want to experience it all so that way I can grow my spirit and impact more lives and, hopefully free more minds as well. Because I think there's a lot of people out there that don't see this. And once you get it, it's amazing.
I like it a lot, and well said as well.
So that's what I'm grateful for.
Awesome. So how do we get in touch with you? Where is the for your shows and for your companies and for you as well?
Best way to get in touch with me, I would say, is to go to my website, which is www.carswell.io. There's a way that you can get in touch with me through all of my social media is linked to that page. And then I guess I'll give my email as well, which is adam@carswell.io.
Awesome.
I as in Idaho, O as in Ohio.
Oh, nice. We'll make sure to put that into the notes, guys. Again, Adam, thank you so much. Really interesting interview. Love hearing about it, and look forward to connecting with you soon.
Thank you, Dwaine. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
All right. Talk to you soon. Take care.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Wealth Through Real Estate Investing podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes or the listening platform of your choice. Also, please check us out at DwaineLClarke.com, as well as find us on Facebook for more useful content and resources.